How much debt can one man hide under a layer of coal dust? $40 million. That's the price tag for trusting a man whose boots were cheap, but whose ambition was lethal. We are about to witness the moment a deal worth several lifetimes was signed in silence, proving that the most dangerous liabilities never show up on a balance sheet. The Komatsu dealership was sterile. Chrome and polished white tile built to showcase giants of steel worth more than most city blocks. The air smelled of new plastic and fresh coffee. Then came the intrusion. His name was Silas. He stood 5'9", covered head to toe in the fine, greasy powder that only deep earth mining produces. His denim jacket was frayed, his baseball cap sweat-stained. He looked like he belonged 1,000 feet down, not across the mahogany desk from Mr. Alistair, the region's chief financier. Silas didn't shake hands. He simply pointed at the glossy brochure photo, the massive yellow 9A2E 4AT dump truck, 4 of them. Alistair raised an eyebrow, not at the quantity, but at the sheer, unblinking confidence in Silas's eyes. This was a man ordering 4 of the world's largest haulers, machines that cost $10 million apiece, with the casual air of buying a pack of gum. $40 million in liability. The papers lay thick and pristine. Silas picked up the pen. His hand was rough, calloused, but steady. He signed the bottom line, linking his entire fragile world to 4 metal behemoths. What was he buying? Profit? No, he was buying time. And that, in the brutal world of debt, is the most expensive commodity of all. Silas didn't waste a minute. That $40 million wasn't just metal, it was a hammer, and he intended to drive it through the earth's crust. Within a week, the 4 haulers, dubbed the 4 horsemen by the crew, were ripping ore out of the ground at a manic pace. The sheer volume of material moving was unprecedented. Alistair, the financier, initially worried about the crushing debt, soon found his inbox choked with transfer confirmations. The gamble paid off immediately and violently. Silas wasn't seeking small returns. He was after the motherlode, and 3 weeks in, they hit it. They named the deposit the Scar, a seam of rare earth minerals so rich and densely packed that the market analysts choked on their morning coffee. The Scar wasn't discovered by geological survey. Silas had bought the claim based on an old, forgotten tale told by a dying prospector who swore the map led to buried starlight. The operation exploded. Silas now owned a hole in the ground that was generating more liquid capital in a month than his entire previous decade combined. He hired fast, paying double the regional average, creating a cult of loyalty among his workers who saw him as their messiah of mud. The old trailers were replaced by prefabricated dormitories, and the grease-stained denim gave way to high-visibility safety gear. The pace never slowed. He was mining time itself, turning every second into cold, hard cash, driven by the rapidly diminishing fear of Alistair calling in the loan. But the fear was changing its shape. It wasn't fear of failure anymore. It was fear of losing what he couldn't control. He started receiving coded messages, slipped into his lunchbox, hinting that rival consortiums were watching his every move, eager to take the Scar by force or finance. The problem with sudden wealth is that it requires sudden bureaucracy. Silas was a miner, a man whose expertise ended where the paperwork began. He could read the fault lines in granite better than he could decipher a balance sheet. The accounts grew chaotic, a beautiful, sprawling mess of invoices, contracts, and regulatory filings that threatened to bury the whole operation under an avalanche of red tape. He needed an overseer, a conductor for the symphony of zeros that danced across his bank statements. That's when Julian Aris appeared, seemingly conjured by the need itself. Julian didn't apply for the job. He was introduced by Alistair, the financier, who framed it as a necessary structural safeguard for the massive debt, a condition Silas could not refuse. Julian was everything Silas was not: tailored, precise, speaking in the smooth, modulated tones of someone who understood that silence holds more power than shouting. He was the product of the best business schools, with a resume that included stabilizing two multinational conglomerates that had teetered on the brink. His reputation wasn't merely good, it was bulletproof. He moved into the newly constructed air-conditioned office and immediately began untangling the threads of chaos. He didn't ask Silas for explanations, he only asked for trust, framed as the necessary backbone for efficient growth. Julian's initial audit revealed a $5 million discrepancy in the first month's revenue, which Julian quietly corrected before Silas even noticed the hole, cementing his image as the savior of the operation. Silas liked Julian because Julian never tried to be a miner. He respected the dirt and stayed strictly within the perimeter of the executive compound. Julian took the weight of the financial world off Silas's shoulders, allowing the protagonist to return to his true passion, the pit. Silas felt the familiar comfort of the dust, the roar of the engines, the real, tangible work. Julian handled the spreadsheets, the international buyers, the complex hedging strategies, and, most critically, the payroll and the massive offshore accounts where the bulk of the Scar's fortune now rested. Julian's authority grew organically, nourished by Silas's genuine lack of interest in high finance. It wasn't granted, it was simply assumed, necessitated by the scale. Julian implemented systems, encrypted ledgers, triple-authenticated transfer protocols, and a network of offshore holding companies designed to protect the assets from predatory taxation and litigation. These measures were sold to Silas as necessary shields, vital armor for a newly formed giant, and Silas agreed, signing the papers without reading the dense legal jargon, trusting Julian's unwavering gaze and meticulous presentation slides. The most secure protocol Julian implemented involved a two-key system for major transfers, but only Julian held both keys, claiming one was a dormant contingency backup used solely for emergencies. Within 6 months, Julian was running the company from the top down, a silent partner holding all the operational levers. He hired his own team of analysts and compliance officers, all professionals whose loyalty was purely transactional, bypassing the original, loyal core crew Silas had established. Julian never spoke ill of Silas, always deferring to him publicly as the founder and visionary, but behind the closed doors of his climate-controlled office, the decisions were unilateral. Silas was the face of the operation. Julian was the central nervous system. Julian systematically replaced the physical security guards at the main gate with a private firm he contracted through a shell corporation, ensuring the perimeter security reported only to him. The fortune at stake now exceeded $500 million, mostly liquid assets parked in the complex web Julian had spun. This was not merely rich, this was political-level wealth, enough to destabilize small economies. Silas knew he was rich, but the sheer volume had become abstract. He saw the new equipment, the clean facilities, and the happy crew, and assumed the system was robust. Julian was the foundation of that assumption. He was the man who never took a day off, who answered every call, whose seeming infallibility was the greatest flaw in Silas's defense against unseen threats. Julian's loyalty wasn't just convincing, it was relentless. He stayed late, corrected Silas's rough grammar in public speeches, and handled every uncomfortable negotiation with ruthless efficiency. His dedication was a shield, deflecting any suspicion. Why would a man who works this hard, who saved the company from early collapse, possibly be plotting its ruin? It didn't compute in Silas's straightforward worldview. He saw labor, and he saw dedication, and he rewarded it with absolute unqualified trust, a trust born from the sheer exhaustion of suddenly managing an empire. Julian was quietly liquidating minor assets, old, decommissioned trucks, far below market value, funneling the difference into a dedicated, untraceable account he opened years prior, long before meeting Silas. The irony was brutal. Silas had battled the earth, debt, and rival prospectors, only to create a safe haven where the only remaining threat was internal, invisible, and sitting across the mahogany table. The structure Julian had built was designed ostensibly to protect the fortune from the outside world. But in reality, every security layer, every international loophole, and every layer of corporate obfuscation served only to make the assets perfectly accessible to the architect himself. Julian had been corresponding secretly with one of the rival consortiums mentioned in the coded messages, offering them granular details on the Scar's operational capacity and Silas's personal weaknesses. Julian knew where the money was, how to move it, and how long it would take Silas to even notice it was gone. He had calculated the precise lag time between execution and discovery. Silas, absorbed in the deep roar of the pit, measuring tons of earth, was blind to the silent manipulation of digits that happened miles above him. The perfect environment for betrayal required two things: an unimaginable sum of money and unimaginable, unquestioning faith. Silas provided the faith. The Scar provided the sum. Julian had already filed for legal residency in a non-extradition country, under a pseudonym he had used briefly during his university years, finalizing the arrangements just last Tuesday. The stage was set, shining under the oppressive weight of $500 million. The mine was producing, the numbers were clean, and the future seemed guaranteed. But Julian Aris wasn't looking at the future of the company. He was polishing his own flawless exit strategy. And as Silas descended into the pit each morning, seeking the comfort of the rough work, Julian was polishing the final piece of the trap, a massive scheduled transfer of funds disguised as a quarterly tax payment, set to execute on the day Silas was scheduled to take his first vacation in 2 years. The clock was ticking, not on profit, but on destruction. The ground didn't just vibrate, it coughed. A deep, grinding cessation of movement echoed through the canyon walls. $40 million, the cost of the new Komatsu fleet, didn't just disappear. It froze, literally cemented into the unforgiving clay of the south pylon. Silas stood on the rim, watching the immobilized giants, his face a mask of disbelief sculpted by diesel fumes and dust. The operational reports were screaming red: hydrostatic pressure imbalances, premature bearing failures, and catastrophic drivetrain seizures. This wasn't bad luck. This was systemic paralysis. He had trusted Julian completely. Why would the most advanced mining vehicles in the world seize up on their inaugural run? Chief Engineer Ramirez, a man who measured his life in torque values and grade percentages, was practically tearing his hair out. They're too heavy, Silas, too rigid for this specific substrata. They're built for dry, hard shale, not this shifting, high-moisture bentonite layer we hit below Pylon 3. Silas shook his head vehemently, the denial a shield against the emerging truth. Julian vetted this. He flew the Komatsu team here 6 times. We have the geological reports. They signed off on the specs. But Ramirez pointed to the shredded rubber tracks, to the deep, unnatural ruts that seemed to swallow the vehicles whole. The surface reports were clean, Silas, but the density profile at 150 feet, that's where the trap was laid. If the initial specs were wrong, who authorized the data manipulation that made them look right? They brought in Dr. Eva Rostova, a specialist in unconventional mineral extraction and ground stability, a woman who spoke the language of rock stress. She didn't look at the trucks. She looked at the mud clinging to the tires. She ran a small, handheld sensor over the clay. Her findings were delivered with cold, surgical precision. The bentonite layer here is unique, Rostova stated, her voice cutting through the panic. It has an unusually high cation exchange capacity. When saturated, it expands and liquefies, forming a shear plane that is catastrophic for rigid, ultra-heavy machinery. Silas stared at her, absorbing the technical jargon. Julian knew this. He had specifically consulted on the Pylon 3 drilling program 2 years ago. Why would Julian recommend the single type of truck designed to fail spectacularly under these exact conditions? The realization hit Silas not as a flash, but as a slow, corrosive burn, stripping away his trust layer by painful layer. He demanded the original feasibility study for the Komatsu purchase, the one Julian had personally managed and presented to the board. Page 47, Section B, Substrata Analysis. The data was there, showing the exact risk of the bentonite layer. But next to it, stamped in bold red ink, was Julian's signature and the note. Risk mitigated by minor structural modification. Internal Memo JA 11/2023. That memo, the one that greenlit the doomed order, was never circulated. Silas immediately called his assistant to pull the Internal Memo JA 11/2023. Where was this supposed structural modification implemented, and why hadn't anyone else seen the memo? The assistant called back within minutes, voice trembling. Silas, that memo, it doesn't exist in the company network. Not in the server backups, not in Julian's drive. It was only ever presented physically during the final procurement meeting, and Julian collected all copies afterward. The air in Silas's office grew thin, suffocating. He understood now. It wasn't incompetence, it was engineering a collapse. Julian didn't overlook the geological incompatibility. He used the knowledge of the bentonite layer as the foundational stress point for the entire operation. The $40 million fleet wasn't an investment. It was the trigger mechanism for the greater disaster. What was the real purpose of spending $40 million to guarantee a failure, if not just to trigger an insurance claim? Silas ran a frantic hand through his hair. The company had purchased specialized catastrophic operational failure insurance just 6 months prior, a policy Julian had also heavily championed, citing unforeseen geological anomalies. The payout ceiling, $500 million. The $40 million loss was a calculated necessary premium. It established a pattern of failure, a pretext. If the entire mine operation collapsed due to inherent geological instability, the $500 million payout would look like a legitimate, if tragic, business resolution. But who benefits? Not the company, not Silas, Julian. If the Komatsu sabotage was just step one, what was the guaranteed step two that would ensure the total operational collapse? He pulled up Julian's laptop, the one Julian had conveniently left behind, and bypassed the password with the shared emergency key. He wasn't looking for proof of theft, he was looking for the instruction manual for betrayal. Hidden deep within a folder labeled Legacy Financial Models. Silas found it. A communication log. A single encrypted message dated the day before the Komatsu trucks arrived to an anonymous offshore account. The message was short, brutal, and utterly damning. Delivery confirmed. Operational failure projected Q2, maximum financial exposure achieved via guaranteed vehicular immobilization on primary mining stratum. This was proof, not a mistake, a contract. Who was the recipient of this encrypted message, and why were they interested in maximizing the mine's financial exposure? The shock was a physical weight, crushing the breath from Silas's lungs. Julian wasn't just skimming profits, he was trying to sink the entire ship for the insurance money, and he had used Silas's most valuable asset, his unquestioning trust, to load the explosives. The Komatsu trucks were the detonators, designed to jam up the operation at its most vital choke point, ensuring the entire extraction cycle ground to a halt and proving the geological instability claim. Silas remembered the warmth of Julian's handshake just last week, the easy smile when they discussed the mine's future. It was all a performance, a meticulously rehearsed role designed to lull him into catastrophic complacency. How did the mine's largest investor, the SCAR, fit into this scheme of sabotage and insurance fraud? Silas swiveled his monitor to the financial dashboard. The clock, the deadline, the large, scheduled transfer of funds disguised as a quarterly tax payment, set to execute in 48 hours, the precise window Julian had calculated between the $40 million operational failure and the triggering of the insurance investigation. That transfer wasn't taxes. It was the mechanism to drain the last liquid reserves before the insurance payout. A move that would leave the company completely hollowed out, impossible to resurrect even after the fraud was revealed. The Komatsu failure wasn't the main objective, it was the noisy distraction. Was this massive scheduled transfer the full payoff, or just the necessary liquidity to secure Julian's permanent exit? The $40 million was a punch, but the pending transfer was the killing blow. Silas grabbed his phone, desperate to stop the wire transfer. He needed proof of Julian's location, proof of intent. He went back to the hidden files, digging through metadata. There, attached to the encrypted communication log, was a small, fragmented travel itinerary. Destination: Curaçao. Name on the ticket reservation: J.A., and the pseudonym. Silas recognized it instantly from an old university story Julian had once told him in a drunken haze, laughing about a fake identity he used for a prank. If Julian is already setting up legal residency under that pseudonym, is it too late to freeze his assets and intercept his escape? The mine was silent now, save for the hum of emergency generators trying to keep the seized trucks from sinking deeper into the treacherous bentonite. $40 million, useless metal, lying like sacrificial victims at the heart of the pit. It was a testament to Julian's meticulous malice. He hadn't just recommended the wrong equipment, he had specified the one solution guaranteed to fail based on proprietary geological data he himself had helped gather. Silas looked at the clock on the financial dashboard. 47 hours, 52 minutes until the massive disguised transfer. The betrayal was complete. The catastrophe was running on rails, and the only thing standing between Julian and $500 million was Silas's ability to act on this devastating truth before the clock ran out. Could Silas prove intentional sabotage before Julian made his final, irreversible financial move? The market opened 30 minutes late for Argos mining, but when it finally did, the floor fell out. It wasn't a dip, it was a detonation. $40 million worth of custom machinery, already sunk in the bentonite pit, became the emblem of Silas's failure, a spectacular, mud-caked monument to ruin. The emergency generator hum sounded like a death rattle in the cavernous main office. Silas stared at the ticker, watching his net worth dissolve into green and red streaks. He knew the sabotage was Julian's masterpiece, but knowing the truth and surviving the ensuing chaos were two entirely different wars. The CEO, Kenner, didn't wait for a formal report. His voice, usually smooth silk, was shredded nylon over the speakerphone, demanding Silas's immediate presence, not for support, but to confirm the paperwork for a rapid, brutal resignation package. What was Kenner so eager to bury? Silas, the auditors are en route. The initial reports suggest gross negligence on your part regarding the feasibility studies of the V4 track systems. We need a fall guy, and frankly, you're wearing the jacket. Silas leaned back, the leather chair suddenly feeling like cold steel. Negligence? No. This was malice, meticulously calculated. But proving malice required time, and time was the one currency he was completely out of. Kenner suddenly hesitated. One more thing, Silas. We found an encrypted file on the server. It looks like it bypassed all standard security protocols last week. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Julian hadn't just recommended the wrong solution. He had stolen proprietary geological data just before the collapse, setting up his next catastrophic play. The media descended like vultures. By noon, the term Argos Abyss was trending globally. Pictures of the giant, half-submerged trucks splashed across every financial headline, framed by screaming text, "Mining mogul's billion-dollar blunder." Silas's reputation, built painstakingly over 2 decades, evaporated in a single news cycle. His phone was a vibrating torture device of demanded explanations and panicked calls from investors. He ignored them all. focusing on the monitor displaying the last known communications from Julian Vance. Vance had been too quiet since the collapse, a chilling silence that suggested careful planning, not panicked retreat. Silas pulled up the server logs again, finding an anomaly in the communication history, a coded one-line message routed to a remote, unknown offshore server, likely setting the stage for the final transfer coordinates. His fingers flew across the keyboard, fueled by pure adrenaline and the bitter taste of betrayal. Julian wasn't just a consultant, he was Silas's college roommate, the best man at his wedding, the godfather to his daughter. That trust wasn't just violated, it had been eviscerated and weaponized. The pain was physical, a tightening vice around his chest. He found it, a heavily compressed file attachment sent 3 days prior to the disaster, addressed only to J.A. and routed through 3 layers of anonymous proxy servers in the Cayman Islands. He managed to decrypt the file within the next harrowing hour. It wasn't the schematic for the failed machinery, nor was it account information. It was an old email chain, dating back 8 years, meticulously preserved, revealing a personal letter of spite hidden in plain sight. Julian had documented every perceived slight, every argument, every business decision where Silas had inadvertently overshadowed him. The file wasn't about money, it was about sheer, calculated spite. Julian hadn't just wanted to get rich, he wanted to tear Silas's life down to the foundation. This wasn't professional sabotage, it was personal revenge, dressed up in a business suit. One particular email caught his eye, time-stamped from the week Silas received a major industry award that Julian had been nominated for. Julian wrote, "He took that stage like he deserved it. He always takes what's mine. I will remind him of the cost of arrogance, even if it takes a decade to calculate the interest." Silas suddenly realized Julian wasn't just plotting against him, but against the entire company structure that celebrated Silas and dismissed Julian. The sheer depth of the performance over those years chilled him. How long had this poison been growing? He realized Julian hadn't just recommended the wrong equipment, he had specifically chosen the bentonite pit location, knowing it was the weakest point in Argos's entire operation. The security team finally breached the consultant's former network folder. It was mostly sanitized, but one folder remained, mislabeled Taxes 2018. Inside, Silas found the real smoking gun. A series of communications between Julian and a shell corporation linked to the V4 track system manufacturer. These weren't consulting emails, they were invoices detailing massive kickbacks paid to Julian to guarantee the specification of the faulty machinery. The kicker: the kickback invoices were deliberately disguised, using the specific alphanumeric code they had invented in university to cheat on history exams. A horrific twist on their old friendship. Silas felt the blood drain from his face. The invoices used a specific cipher for the payment descriptions, Alpha Delta 7. It meant guaranteed passing grade then. Here, it meant guaranteed ruin. Julian had used the language of their shared youth to document his final damning betrayal. The financial disaster was one thing. The personal devastation of realizing that his oldest friend had been meticulously planning his downfall for years, using their history as his ledger, was shattering. Then a notification flashed across the screen. Transaction initiation alert. Target, 35 hours remaining. Julian was accelerating the timeline, moving the massive transfer up by 12 hours. Silas had lost precious time in the fog of the public collapse and the feverish search for proof. He rubbed his temples, the exhaustion bone deep. He scanned the transaction logs tied to the kickback payments. One small transfer stood out, routed not to Julian's known accounts, but to an account registered in Lisbon under the name Vance D. Julian's younger brother, David, who had been estranged from Julian for years. Why involve David? Was the estranged brother an unwilling mule, or had Julian managed to corrupt him too? David might be the leverage Silas needed, the one vulnerability in Julian's airtight escape plan. Suddenly, tucked into the metadata of the largest kickback invoice, a tiny audio file blinked. Silas clicked it, bracing himself. The speaker crackled, and then Julian's voice, clear, calm, and utterly devoid of remorse, filled the silent room. "It's done. 40 million in the mud, 500 million coming to me. Silas always underestimated me. He won't even see the knife coming until he's reading about his bankruptcy in the morning paper. Tell the V4 team to finalize the transfer immediately upon receipt of the final legal notice." Silas slumped forward, the weight of the 8 years of fabricated friendship crushing him. He had protected Julian, championed him, trusted him implicitly with the company's future. And Julian had laughed while sharpening the blade. The confession was sealed with callous indifference. The phone rang again, this time an internal line. It was Kenner's secretary. "Mr. Thorne, the auditors are here and they have a document for you. The CEO requires your presence immediately in the boardroom. The final legal notice, his termination." Julian had timed the complete destruction of Silas's career and reputation down to the very minute of his escape, and the delivery of the letter was the trigger for Julian's final transfer. 35 hours left, and Julian was waiting for Silas's professional execution before making his irreversible financial move. Grief was a luxury he couldn't afford. Silas wiped the sudden moisture from his eyes. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He had the weapon now. It was time to go to war. Silas did not fight the termination. When the auditor handed him the final legal notice in the cold, mahogany-lined boardroom, Silas accepted it with unsettling calm. He signed the papers that finalized his professional execution. But as he stood, he didn't address the board. He addressed the chief auditor, Kenner. "Mr. Kenner." Silas's voice was low, cutting through the stunned silence. "While these documents terminate my fiduciary relationship, they also activate a dormant regulatory clause concerning the pending V4 transfer. The V4 system requires absolute confirmation of solvency from the original corporate director, a confirmation that is now officially impossible." The auditor's face went white. Julian's grand finale, designed to bypass normal checks, was predicated entirely on the clean transfer occurring after. Silas's legal status was wiped. But Silas had engineered a legal countermeasure years ago, disguised as redundant protocol. Julian, intoxicated by the certainty of his success, had initiated the final transfer 30 minutes too early, betting on the speed of the system. He hadn't accounted for the small, crucial window where Silas's termination would trigger a freeze, not a transfer. Across the globe, in a luxury suite overlooking the Singapore skyline, Julian raised a glass of vintage champagne, watching the clock tick down to the scheduled transfer time. 0 hour arrived. Instead of the expected notification confirming the billions had landed, his secure terminal flashed a crimson warning: international asset seizure and regulatory hold, all accounts frozen. Julian's silent roar was swallowed by the sheer, devastating irony. He had been so focused on the complex path of his escape that he forgot the oldest law. The foundation must be sound. His own structure of greed, built on the shifting sands of betrayal, had eaten itself. The very legal mechanism he used to confirm Silas's defeat had simultaneously triggered his own financial guillotine. He received the justice of the thief who trips on his own wire, losing not just the bounty, but his freedom, his name, and his meticulously planned life. Months later, Silas stood before the salvaged remains of the company, now lean, ethical, and built on trust, not deceit. He had lost a fortune, but he had won back his soul. The price of greed, he reflected, was the ultimate isolation. A magnificent cage built entirely by the victim's own hands. Honest work might lead to slow growth, but it leaves an enduring monument. Greed guarantees only a swift, explosive ruin. Moral equilibrium, painful as its restoration was, had finally been achieved. The harvest of the hasty is always bitterness, but integrity is the only coin that retains its value in the final market. Thank you for watching this journey into the cost of betrayal. If you found this reflection meaningful, please like this video, subscribe for more profound stories, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.